When I came out, it was completely out of control. It was old school policing. 6-shot Smith & Wesson, 2 stupid little ammo pouches that were plastic. You opened it up, the bullets rolled out in the street.
No shit.
Nightstick that broke immediately. Piece of crap pine. Pair of cups, mace, which they told us don't use, and a radio and a flashlight. That was it. So I learned from veterans who taught us how to survive with minimal amounts of equipment, 10-layer Kevlar vests, and we're seizing AK-47s and we're seizing Tech 9s and all that stuff with our 6-shot and our 10-layer Kevlar vests. It probably was more balls than brains.
Hey guys, if you missed out on the last conference in Nashville, Tennessee, you don't want to miss out on the next one. It's April 28th through May 3rd, Orlando, Florida, the Gaylord Palms Resort and Convention Center. You made a mistake missing the last one. You don't want that to happen again on this one. 5 days of some of the best training you're ever going to experience packed into one event. We have an early bird special right now, $50 off. Use 24 early bird on our website, streetcop.com. Look for the conference, click the link, register today. If you want to get significantly better at this profession in 5 days, don't dare miss out on the 2024 Street Cop Conference.
111, 110.
Training to be a street cop.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Street Cop Training Podcast. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of Street Cop Training. My name is Dennis Benino, and I have with us 2 guys you might be familiar with from the Gold Shield podcast. We've already discussed why that Gold Shield podcast name was created. We have Tom Smith and Dan Murphy, and I don't even want to guess Dan's fucking rank because he'll get all offended if I don't call him a fucking captain if he was a captain.
Nope.
I'm just kidding. We got 2 guys. These are some dudes from the NYPD. Probably have some fantastic stories and seem to be on a mission. Maybe Tom, we'll start with you and give us a little context of who you are and the podcast you guys run and all that shit.
Okay. I did 30 years in the NYPD as a detective. Worked in patrol, narcotics, robbery squad, the gang unit with Danny. And then after 9/11, was assigned to the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, where I stayed there for the next 17 years and ran terrorism investigations around the world. Ended up in 17 different countries running various terrorism investigations on top of being in Afghanistan for 3 months doing a kidnapping case. So ran around quite a bit, had a very fortunate career, enjoyed every minute of it. Grew up in that household with my dad being an NYPD detective through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So it was all I wanted to do, got a chance to do it. And one thing my dad always told me was, if you're going to do it great, no matter what it is. So
I love it.
It was always on my mind. So I just tried to do the best I could and had a good time doing it.
It's fantastic. That's awesome. Dan?
Yeah, well, Tom is very humble. He actually has a heck of a lot of accomplishments in his police career. He'll probably talk about some of them today. But, he and I started the podcast. I'll tell you about my background in a second. But the Gold Shields podcast, we reconnected a couple of years ago. He got lost in the world of counterterrorism. And he became, a secret squirrel around the world. Now, we jumped on the podcast as an opportunity to honor the men and women of law enforcement and to call out the need for a stigma depletion. Let's get rid of the stigma around mental health issues. Let's save some cops' lives. So we have a kind of a dual mission there. But in addition to being a great podcast, that's probably the White House right now. Excuse me, they're always calling me.
Yeah, that's right. Being a great podcast, you think you would turn your fucking phone off before you came on?
No, it's the Joint Chiefs of Staff are always calling me for advice.
I'm making sure mine's off too. I just checked mine. I'm like, oh shit, I better check mine.
So in addition to being an amazing investigator and an all-around great guy, Tom is also a very committed. What's that stuff that he does? You know it. You love it, Tom. It's the scrapbooking. He's very committed to his scrapbooking and his cats, and he watches the Golden Girls on a regular basis. He's just an interesting guy.
I just want to stop for a second and say, I think the Golden Girls is a highly underrated show.
I agree. I totally agree. That's how I came up with Gold. That's how I came up with Gold Shields. I thought of the Golden Girls. That's all.
So, yeah, I did 20 years in the NYPD and came on in 1984 when I was 21 years old. Grew up in Queens. My biggest influence with that was my uncle, who I did about 39 years with the department. He worked in headquarters for a lot of it. Knew a lot of people, and when he suggested I take the test, I took it, and I ended up working in everything from Tom and I worked in the same precinct in West Harlem, the 30th precinct, a very busy little shop. Different times though. I became a detective, worked my way through narcotics in Brooklyn North. Back in the day when Brooklyn North was the most homicide-ridden stretch of territory in North America. And it was not uncommon to hear shots constantly while we were out. It was just a time. And so went from there on to organized crime. I did 3 years in a task force with the DEA targeting Southeast Asian heroin. Had some great experiences there, and then moved on to the major case floor where I had the opportunity to work on kidnappings. And we had a lot of them in New York at the time. So I worked on probably 100, 125 kidnappings. Kidnappings for ransom, victims being held, duct tape, beaten, raped, stabbed, you name it. All it was crazy stuff. Crazy times. Went on to the rank of sergeant, 4-6 precinct in the Bronx. Busy 1 mile, 1 square mile. Busy. 340 something cops assigned to 1 square mile. Doesn't make any sense on paper, but you always needed more. Let's put it that way. That's how busy that shop. I knew it well. Went from there on to eventually made my way to the gang unit with Tom. That's where I first met him, in the Bronx Gang Unit. Now, we had 13 detectives. We had 47,000 identified gang members in the Bronx, and our mission was do something. Do something about the gang problem in the Bronx. The Bloods and the Crips are killing each other. The Nietas, the Latin Kings, they're running rampant. You turn a corner, everybody's wearing the same colors, and it was just a bad time. And we did our best, and we ended up doing. We were, our team ran a tremendous case. Put the founder of the United Blood Nation in Fed prison in Florence forever. So that was a good experience. Went on from there. 9/11, of course, was working in a different unit called TARU, but went on to the Terrorism Task Force after that, where Tom and I again worked together. Had great experiences there. Went into the private sector. Ended up becoming the chief security officer for US Bank. Traveled the world. Did a lot of things with them. Learned a lot. And now I currently do stuff with Tom. We have a couple of entrepreneurial pursuits, and we have fun.
It's good stuff. What was it like when you both walked into the same room together and you'd be working at the JTTF? Were you just like, did that music start playing like in the meadows and you guys start floating towards each other with your arms wide open?
Oh, massive hug. Yeah, it was nasty. No.
Yeah, we were in the gang unit together, and then Dan had an opportunity to go to TARU, which was a great gig at the time. And then I had a great shot to go to the Pct Robbery Squad where my old partner was working. So hooked up with him again. So Dan and I always stayed in touch. We were actually, I think we talked to each other right when everything happened on 9/11, when we were able to just say, hey, you okay? You heading down there? Yeah, stay safe. And then as the days after that and weeks after that was going on, we both received our separate phone calls about going down to JTTF and being asked to go down there. So we were kind of in touch with each other as that process was going on, and actually got picked up and transferred there the same day. So we were always together through the whole process. And then Danny asked me to be on his team once he got an assignment down there. So I was working for him again, which was great.
What was it like being NYPD in the 80s?
I grew up in a city, and I was used to certain things, a certain quality of life I was really used to. My father worked for the transit authority. We didn't have a car till I was probably 11, 12. So I took the subway and the buses everywhere. I was used to the graffiti and the dirt and the garbage and the robberies and all that stuff. I had been mugged and knocked unconscious when I was 13. I had seen all kinds of stuff. There had been homicides in my neighborhood. I passed crime scenes. And it was a working class neighborhood. It wasn't even a bad neighborhood. But 1984, I became a cop, and New York City was at the time out of control. It was so bad that on the Major Deegan Expressway in the Bronx, and Tom knows this, just north of Yankee Stadium, there's a bunch of tenement apartment buildings that were abandoned, rubble-strewn, junkie hangouts, that the mayor at the time commissioned an artist to take these planks of wood and paint window scenes on them like it was a window with a flower pot, and put them on so people driving past who were semi-blind could be convinced that it was like a legitimate residence. That's how bad New York was. When I came out, it was completely out of control. It was old school policing, 6-shot Smith & Wesson, 2 stupid little ammo pouches that were plastic. You opened it up, the bullets rolled out in the street. Nightstick that broke immediately, piece of craft pine. We all went and got Coca-Colas after that broke because that didn't break easy. Pair of cups, mace, which they told us don't use, and a radio and a flashlight. That was it. It was real basic. In the car, we call it RMP. In the RMP, you had the following: steering wheel, AM radio, turret lights with one switch, you up or down, on or off. You had a radio sitting there, a portable, well, it wasn't a portable, it's positioned in a car that you could use, nobody used anymore. And boop, on the steering wheel. That's it. We didn't have a screen in the back, divider. We didn't have a mobile terminal, nothing. It was the old school figure it out days. And it was, and we were out of control. So I learned from veterans who taught us how to survive with minimal amounts of equipment, 10-layer Kevlar vests. And we're seizing AK-47s and we're seizing Tech 9s and all that stuff with our 6-shot and our 10-layer Kevlar vests. It probably was more balls than brains, but we had so many homicides, so many robberies, so many shootings. Drugs were out of control. 1985 crack hit and the city went crazy. The violence automatically went through the roof. Drug robberies, territory fights, people stealing, internal discipline within the drug gangs. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. And just tell a real quick story too. One of the things that summarized it to me was New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve in Times Square, 1984 into 85. I'm about to leave my 6th month of street training, go to my permanent command. And all of us are there, like 10,000 cops work New Year's Eve. And it wasn't like it is now, where everybody's corralled into an area and you stay there. It was just wild, open. And midnight comes, Dick Clark, the ball drops, people are having a great time. By 12:30, the cameras are off and the gangs come out. The Wolfpack gangs from the outer boroughs and from Manhattan, groups of anywhere from 5 or 6 to 20 or 30. And they're robbing people and they're going nuts. So our bosses basically said, go get them. Don't make any arrests because you're going to get stuck in Manhattan. I worked in Brooklyn. You're going to get stuck in Manhattan in the court system for 3 days. So don't put your cuffs on anybody, but go get them. And it was mayhem until about 4:30 in the morning. Absolute insanity. And all the veterans were like, that's this way every year. But nobody saw that. Everybody saw Dick Clark and a happy time, but it was crazy. New York was insane.
Wow, almost 40 years ago, imagine.
Mm-hmm. Coming up on 40 years, you're right. Yeah. I'm a lot older than I look. You can say that.
Hey, you guys look quite youthful for the ages that we're proclaiming that you're going to be. I mean, so you're born in, said 84, you started, you were 21, so you're born in 63, right?
62, actually, yeah. I turned 22 after a couple months on, so I was frozen for a few years, though.
Yeah, I could tell. I could have been a detective. You see that? Now, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is like you guys were losing cops like crazy too, right? Like getting killed in the line of duty, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
what was that like?
That was a big thing going on at the time. With the less weapons that we had and the vests and not having speed loaders at the time, Scott Goodell's death changed that. Mm-hmm. But again, it took a cop getting killed to get away from these dump pouches that, would just fall. Like Dan said, you'd open them, they would just fall all over the place. And if you're in the middle of a shooting, trying to, keep your hands steady and look at the perp and try to load your gun. And that's what happened to Scott in an alleyway behind a garbage can. He was trying to reload his gun. Perp came up, shot him in the head. So we had to, that propelled us to get the speed loaders. But again, it took a tragedy to do it. Danny was actually working. I wasn't on the job yet. Danny was working and can talk about this even more. The night that 2 police officers were killed in the same night. He was working that night. I wasn't on the job yet, but I remember, reading about it and seeing it. And then the death of Eddie Byrne, it was continuous. It was just one after another after another. And like I said, Dan, that was a heartbreaking night that you were involved in.
Yeah. I mean, no matter where you worked in the city, you had a story of somebody you knew or somebody who was the next precinct over. And it was endless. We went to a lot of funerals and a lot of them were very, very sad. And so some of them were simply just a matter of being outgunned or just the bold brazenness of the drug trade. And there's just so much crime going on and that becomes the norm. Yeah, 1988, October 18th, 1988. Rest in peace, Chris Hoban and Mike Busick. Two separate incidents in Manhattan North, about 50 something blocks apart from each other. So 2 miles apart from each other and 2 hours apart from each other. Chris Hoban, undercover cop in narcotics, inside an apartment, doing an inside buy. It goes bad. They're going to rip him. They killed him. His partner defended himself. I was part of, well, great guy. And he went through a lot. And just a couple hours later, Mike Busick and his partner, Joe Barbato, good friends of mine, I'd worked up there with them, and Mike got shot through the heart. It was a nasty thing. Guy was doing a drug robbery, and he came out, and yeah, I mean, these things happen, and it happens in a second back then. It was, we almost got numb to it, how much of it there was. And Eddie Byrne, the assassination of Officer Edward Byrne was a disgrace. He should have never been in a cop car by himself outside of a drug witness's house in that neighborhood in Queens on a midnight as a 22-year-old kid.
Yep.
And they set him up. They rolled up on him, and they went to send a message. They shot him brutally, terribly. And the only thing I can say about the NYPD at that moment, one of the most proudest I was how we responded to those things. To say that we unleashed the dogs of war on any area or any specific entity that took out one of ours is an understatement. We went after that area so hard and so heavy and so fast that it wasn't long before the detectives had the information they needed and made the arrests. And they did a great job. Everybody did a great job. And I remember being out there, and we were, as pissed off as you can get. You did this to one of ours? This doesn't go unanswered. So we went out there and we did legally everything we could and should do to get information. And that area felt it. And we've had other killings. We've had a detective killed from the Organized Crime Investigation Division. And it was a stupid situation. He should never have gotten shot. And we turned up the heat, nasty, on that specific organized crime family. And they felt it so bad, they gave him up. These things happened. DEA agent Everett Hatcher shot to death by some knucklehead mafia guy. Well,
Gus Faraci.
Yeah. I hate to say his name.
I know.
Everett Hatcher was shot and killed by this idiot, and he went on the run. Well, that organized crime family had so much heat, they gave him up. His own uncle killed him and dumped him in a street in Brooklyn.
Yep.
All about business. But that's how New York was. It was tough times, man. But you know what? We're always alert, though. If anything, it makes you always in this state of, you're ready for it as opposed to it shocks you,
Man, that's wild. Were you guys getting killed with overtime all the time out there? And
yeah, I mean, the overtime came because of events that happened, and in the worst events that happened, you stayed. And that was a continuous thing throughout on patrol, in narcotics in the squad or whatever. Your overtime was dictated by bad things, unfortunately, that were going on that you had to respond to and go out. And, when it went, like Dan said, when it involved the cop, everything went out the window. You didn't care how long you were there. You didn't care what you were making. You didn't care how many hours of overtime it was. You just stayed and did it. You didn't sleep. You didn't eat. And the focus was just get whoever was responsible for either hurting or killing one of our own. And that was the mindset. You didn't care about anything.
why were people so bold then, knowing the repercussions of killing a cop or hurting a cop? Why were they still so bold to do such a thing?
I honestly think some of it had to do with we had organized drug groups that were from other countries who had a completely different view of the police and who had felt they had nothing to lose. They had an escape hatch. They could jump on a plane and go down to the DR or Jamaica in a heartbeat and get lost. And there was just so much money involved. There was a lot of drug money involved, and they were ruthless. Internal discipline within those organizations took out more people than you can count. You messed up, you shaved a little money off the top, they kill you in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. A very violence-prone culture, and if we threatened that, they wouldn't always draw down on us, but but if it was really threatening to them, or if they were, if you're on lifetime parole, let's say, I'm going to go back if I even get popped with a gun. So they might as well take a shot. They got on the loose, and that's how it was viewed. Crazy times. It was crazy times, and I sadly see New York going back to some of that. We had prosecutors who were throwing great cases out back then. Not everybody, but some. And it was, putting people back out on the street like it's nothing. The prison system in the state of New York and the jail system in the city of New York couldn't handle all the arrests we made. On the island of Manhattan in the 80s, it was common. You get an arrest number when you make an arrest. You go to central booking and the arrest number will be M for Manhattan, blah, 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 the year, and then the number. And by December, it was like M, 128,365 people arrested on the island of Manhattan in 12 months.
Right.
That's people went through the system. That's not people who got a summons and discharged or whatever, or pulled in for disorderly conduct and sent on their way with an appearance ticket. These are people put through the system. So there's no room for them. So you have people who are walk-in felons who are really violent people.
At what point did you guys look at the city and say, hey, things are pretty good here, not bad? It's the best I've seen it. When do you think in your 30 years of working, or 20 years, or even lifetime, have you looked at New York City overall and said, this is probably the best it's been, or looking back, it was the best it had been?
You know what? Dan and I both separately went through the worst times and the best times of the city. Dan in the mid 80s, and then I came on in 90 when the city was going through its just onslaught of crime with 2,500 to 3,000 homicides and 110,000 robberies. So then in 1994, it all switched when Bratton came in, and Giuliani and Anamone and Timoney and Jack Maples, and that whole dream team enabled us to do our job again and start locking everybody up and keep them in jail. And dramatically throughout the years after 94, crime has gone down. For me, I would say probably the best times were probably the early 2000s, I would say, when the city you were comfortable enough that you could go to Central Park again. You saw people jogging in Central Park again before they would go to work at 4 or 5 in the morning, which you never saw in the 80s and 90s. That was a death sentence. You
get rapes, the murders. It's crazy, right?
Oh yeah.
So once you start seeing Central Park filled with people either late at night or early in the morning, and then Times Square also. Dan mentioned what Times Square was like. Times Square was a war zone in the 80s and 90s. Mm-hmm. You couldn't walk near there, much less with your family, but just on your own, and then you started to see just families in Times Square again and in the city, probably in the 2000s. That's what I would say. That was my view, but it took a lot to get there. It took a lot of hard work. So when you see what's going on today, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit of all the work that was done and blood and sweat and all that the cops put into cleaning the city up just kind of gets tossed away when you see what it's like today. And now it's back to what it was. Now you're not going down there with your family. You're not going into Central Park again. So it's heartbreaking to see, but hopefully it changes.
Feel bad. The people have asked me, what do you think the solution is? I said, I wish I could even tell you, because, every time I go to New York, I'm close enough. I have family. They live in New York, so I do go there. Not knocking the efforts of the poor people that work at the NYPD, but they're young. Like every time I go there, they got a lot of young cops, and it takes time to get good at this game. And I think the people who were good at this either left or don't even get involved anymore. They lost I don't want to be held to a statistic here, but like more than 10% of the agency had left, in the de Blasio administration.
Oh yeah, easily. They're at low numbers now. The city of New York, with the massive population it has, people say on paper, you guys have 33,000 cops or something like that. That's a lot of cops. Yeah, it is, but that's a big city.
Oh yeah,
a lot of need for that personnel. They can be stretched thin, even 33,000 easily. A couple of demonstrations going on. You have a riot that takes place. You have some major event. The presidential visit even sucks up hundreds, if not thousands of cops. It's crazy how those cops get moved around so much just to try to cover all bases. And even that, it's not enough. It's a big geographical city, and it's got so many unique problems and situations that it has to deal with. You mentioned before, just asked before really quickly, the best of times, and I would agree with Tom that The Giuliani administration came in, and one of the things that they did before they were elected was, Rudy Giuliani is a real New Yorker, and he talked to business people, and the business people, and that's the money in New York, right? They were basically up in arms. They were saying, this city is out of control. We're moving our businesses out. There's no point in staying here unless, if you're going to get elected mayor, you better do something to take this back. And he was going to take it back anyway. But he aligned himself with certain companies. And one of my friends at the time was in a position where he was working on as part of this effort. The Disney folks came into New York and went up and down Times Square with a massive checkbook, and they went into every XXX theater, every dirty bookstore, and they walked in and said, how much? And always there was some guy there making money hand over fists, and he was like, I would never sell. How much? I wouldn't sell it for 5, would you sell it for 10? Mm-hmm. They bought everything. And as a result, they opened up theaters for live plays. They opened up movie theaters. They opened up restaurants. They opened up family-oriented. They brought that back. They wiped it out with a big checkbook, and they made an investment. And it became, like Tom said, the dream was you should be able to get on a subway with your family, come into Times Square, and have a nice day. And that was a reality, and that's going away. Yeah, it's sad to see.
Hey guys, follow us on all social media platforms to include Instagram, Twitter, Facebook group. We have so much information going out every single day, and we don't want you to miss out on any of that stuff. So check it out. Go give us a follow.
Yep. Yeah. And like Dan said, the numbers are low at this point, and people have to remember when you say 30,000, to another agency, that's an enormous number, but that's not 30,000 uniform guys. That's the entire department. That's detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, chiefs, all that.
Civilians too, right? Civilians.
No,
civilians are a separate number.
Civilians are separate. But, so the number of the 30,000 dwindles down dramatically to just guys and girls in uniform. That number goes down a lot. So it's not 30,000 uniform guys.
It's sad. And, I hope that there's change on the horizon. And, we're doing the best we can to provide support. And we're constantly learning and growing how we can be better as a training company. But, our work is important, and we're thankful to have a lot of the men and women of NYPD who are fans and supporters of the training that we put on. Because, it does feel like they don't have anybody that's really helping them. And people don't realize they're killing them. I mean, these guys are living in patrol cars. They're literally getting off of work, going to their own personal vehicle, going to sleep, and coming right back out 6 hours later and going back on post. This is going on 5-6 days a week. I had a guy, I think there was in a newspaper, we just heard from him. I forgot what it was, so I don't want to misquote this, but I know that he had quit because he had a kid. And I think the kid, this may have been in the New York Post, or it was right to us directly. But the kid, the wife had a bad pregnancy, and they needed the father to be there to whatever it might have been. There was some issue that wasn't just they had the kid and 2 days later they're back at home and everybody's sleeping and everything's fine. This is a major incident, and he could not get approved to be off to be there for his family, and so he just quit.
Well, what I have heard from departments around the country, and Tom and I have talked to quite a few for a variety of reasons. If you have NYPD training and some street experience in New York City, you are incredibly desirable to be hired by thousands of other agencies around this country who will scoff you up in a minute.
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and to that, I don't think it's NYPD. I think everybody is hurting so badly for manpower that, the reality is the bar is set very low. There are some good things that have come out of this. Unfortunately, we had to go this bad, and some of those things are pay has gotten very competitive in states that it typically wasn't. You got agencies in Florida now doing 6 figures after 4 years. That blows away a lot of agencies in the Northeast. You got Texas going well into the 6 figures for patrolmen in the the North Dallas regions and around there. And so when guys are sitting around here looking at their pay and going, wait, hold on a second. First of all, I live in the most expensive fucking place in the world. They don't support us. We got no support for the district attorney. Texas obviously is sending this signal that come here. It's cheaper. I'm going to get paid more because the taxes are completely different. It starts becoming a no-brainer. I think the hang up people have is it's hard to leave your family and your life that It's hard to leave the pizza I mean, like, but the reality is yes, that everybody is, and you know what's crazy is not only has that shifted where people have less interest, is that agencies have to recognize that they don't have to worry about recruiting. They should really be worrying about retention as well. Because if you could retain somebody, and dude, I'm telling you, I know these younger generation of cops, I don't know, knocking them one bit. They're not afraid to get to fucking leave. They're just not. I talked to a girl last night and she wrote to me at the first thing is like, today's my last shift, and sent a picture. And I hadn't talked to her in a while. She's having some difficulty. And I said, you know, like, where you got, like, did you go to another police department? She's like, no, I'm done. I love policing, but I'm not doing this anymore. She took a job at a corporate. And so, and she loves it. Listen, this is somebody who is dedicated, true blue, good, somebody that society wants in a patrol car. What a wonderful human being. And it's not the only people are just, they're just like, nah, you know what? You guys want to be dicks to me? We're not taking it anymore. They're not tolerating it. It ain't 1985 at the 42nd precinct.
You're right. And you know what? We took a lot of crap. I think Tom and I both went into it, as many people did. And I think Tom and I have talked about this many times. The numbers, 1982, when I took the tests, 50-something thousand people took the NYPD test, and it was given once every 5 years. Now they give them several times a year, and they just hired a class of 380. Tom, when he took his test, what was it, 80-something thousand people?
85,000 people took my
85,000. It was a desirable job. And when I went on it with the mentality, and I'm sure Tom did too. I'm doing at least 20. This is my career. This is where I am. NYPD, that's it. And I put up with what I had to put up with. We were given bags of shit to eat and told it was, you know, caviar, a lot of stuff like that. And you just did it because everybody else was going through the same stuff. But you're right. We have a younger generation now, and I see this in other businesses that I'm involved in. They're not putting up anything they don't want for a minute, and it's a little crazy. It's a little too much.
Understood.
Very okay with leaving any job at any time.
You know why? Because they have options.
Yeah.
They just do. And I'll be honest with you, good for them. Because I don't think anybody should be subjected to being treated like a piece of shit for doing a job that is, one, very difficult, two, very mentally taxing. Three, I think we really got to give a lot of credit to the men and women that are showing up today with the enthusiasm they do to do this job, with the intention of being that change. You know, right, wrong, or indifferent, it's not what it once was. It doesn't mean it can't be done right now. And the reality is like, I feel like I'm in the same boat. If you said to me that, you know, like, hey, you're like, people trust themselves more. They're not worried about things like you and I and all of us we worry about. They're just like, yeah, I'll figure it out. There's a lot of things to do in this world. And they're right. There are a lot of things to do in this world. And they're not afraid to leave.
Yep. And you know why? I think one simple thing about that, you hear young kids say it all the time. And we said the opposite. We said careers. It's our career. They just say job. You know, I have a job, you know, not a career. And because they don't have that mindset. They don't look at it that way. You know,
I hate to paint everybody with a broad brush, though. Like, I'm telling you, like, you know, people will say, oh, policing's dead in the country. Like, I'll show you half the agencies in this country who, like, are out there getting it. You know what I mean? Like, the other half, maybe not so much, but they care. Their administration's fantastic. They're getting it. You know, they got good support from their administration, their state, their local government. They, you know, and people are showing up very prideful in the work that they do. They do a really nice job. And then there's the other half. Just like it's like supervision, right? Like, I mean, you know, half your bosses are fantastic and half aren't.
You know, and I think any swipes or criticism that Tom or I, if I can speak for both of us, ever give towards policing today, it's not because we're the old guys in the sidelines who like to say better. It's not it. It's how the public perceives them, the pressures that are on them, the ridiculous expectations, the unattainable expectations. Take people into custody, but don't ever allow them to be scratched. It's very hard. And I honestly feel for the men and women who are in their 20s right now, trying to serve the public, which is what Tom and I did. I know you did too, Dennis. You didn't do it for the money. You want to go out there, you want to do a good job, you want to do the right thing, you want to uphold the standards of your department, you want to do, and we look at places like New York City where a guy like de Blasio comes in and his policies were so stupid. It hurt the city, it hurt the cops, it hurt the department. And then you have, you know, Eric Adams, who I don't know, but just watching him in the media, some of the stuff he jumps on board with, I'm not a fan of. And I will say that He brings on a guy, some guy to be his gun violence czar several months ago. Now, the picture I saw in the paper was less than impressive, but the guy who he brings on to be his gun violence czar, a friend of his, did time for a homicide.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make this up. This is the stuff of the skit. How do you respect, how do you look at your administration when you're a cop and say, oh, they're doing a good job, I mean, they're really trying, they care about me? They don't. In New York, it's sad. We had a lot of that too, but we also had support. I don't know, it's tough. I feel for them. It's just a difficult time for policing in general. Everybody's videotaping everything you do constantly. People are challenging you. They're, these street house lawyers. You have no right to search me. You have no right to ask me for my license when I pulled you up. Everybody thinks they know their rights. Everybody thinks they want to throw them in your face. Some people actually do know their rights, but they've made policing an impossible job. And that's why I feel bad for them.
I often think about like how bad's it got to get for it. And again, I think the pendulum has swung back a little bit. And I got to tell you, being who I am and trying to do the right thing for everybody, I become a target. Oof.
Mm-hmm.
Oof. And you know what the craziest thing is? I'm actually the person that maybe the anti-police people really do want, but they're so emotionally charged up and in some sense unintelligent that they can't even see, because they're so blurred by their emotions and hatred for the police. They don't recognize that while they're criticizing us, we're actually the solution. And so I don't, listen, I'm not a perfect human being, but the work we've done has saved a lot of lives.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll start with how many police suicides we've avoided because of the work that we put in to this organization. So while there be criticism about the work that we do, we're certainly proud of the work that we do. And we continue to do it better every single day. We try to, at least. And, so all hope can never be lost.
No,
it's impossible. It can't be. Just the question is, when does it become uncomfortable enough where people have had it? I don't know, man. It's really hard to, and the reality is like, what do you do? Well, you do the best that you can. You can't change everything in the world, but we can certainly do what we can to make sure we live by a moral code to support the men and women in blue in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think the more victims dictate how cities change. All right. Crime rate and victims.
It's terrible, right?
Because victims vote. Okay. That's what happens. When there's going to be a time where people are going to stop voting by just the letter at the end of someone's name. And they're actually going to listen to what candidates say they're going to do. That's going to happen because this is unsustainable and it's getting worse and worse. And people are going to, like we said, people are going to have enough that they can't go out, to dinner. That's going to reach a point where it's going to stop, and it's going to stop when these people stop getting elected, who don't care about their city, don't care about the citizens, care about what's going to happen to just them. And they sacrifice the citizens of their city to do so. And at some point, people are going to catch on to that. And that's when it's going to change. When enough victims get to the polling spots and start changing who their elected officials are and stop voting by just the letter at the end of someone's name and what their policies are and how it's going to change and how their relationship with law enforcement is and the DA's office and all that, it's gonna have to happen, or it's not going to change. And the only way to do it is to let cops do their job and to keep bad guys in jail.
I had to go somewhere recently, and I hadn't been in this city in a long time. And I got there early and I was driving around and I said to myself, I can't park my truck on the street. There was plenty of parking, but I'm like, I got to find a garage. I can't leave this truck out. I'm going to come back. It's going to be, and I'm just like, dude, I'm talking like walking 2-3 blocks. Mm-hmm. I'm like, holy shit. It's like 9 o'clock in the morning. Like, I feel like there's a variable. Anything can happen at any moment. And it's 9 in the morning on like a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And other people that I had to meet up with were like, yo, like this place is crazy. And I'm like, yeah, it's wild, and we need to get our priorities straight, and I got to tell you, I don't know I think there's a lot of solutions to it, but got to let these cops come out and do their jobs. They got to have support.
We had Bill Bratton. We're fortunate enough to have Bill Bratton on our show, and he was gracious enough to give us his time, and he gave us his insights into what he thinks is needed. And I think it's really history repeats itself, good and bad. And the policies and programs that he and his team put in place in the 90s in New York City that were executed by guys like Tom and I and many others worked. They actually worked. But who has the political will to do that anymore? That's the thing. Can you stand up to the forces that are out there and tell them we need to be aggressive, smart police? I don't know that it's going to happen soon, but that's what's needed. And it's really a focus on little things and big things at the same time, and not overlooking the quality of life stuff, because that leads to bigger stuff. And he nailed it. I mean, he was the architect of turning New York City around. I mean, if you can turn New York City, that's like turning the Titanic around in a toilet bowl. He was the architect of it, and he put together a team that we always called the dream team. They were amazing, very smart, very insightful, and not afraid to go do, because he had the mayor in place who wanted the city turned around. And we need political will to do it.
You know what the crazy thing is here we are, three guys who are pretty much completely unaffected on our day-to-day lifestyles of the things that are happening in the inner cities. Yet we seem to be some of the most compassionate people for those poor folks who are stuck in those situations. And they essentially can't get out. Where are they going to go? You got nothing. And so people walk to school in the morning, kids terrified of violence. They don't even get a fair shot at life. And the whole thing just comes down to people who have common sense and people who don't have common sense. And the policies that are in place, albeit maybe good intentioned, are not resolutions to the problems. And I always see this, like, how do we have a hunger issue in this country? Let's just start there. Let's all just say, all right, listen, let's put everything on the back burner at the moment. We need to feed American families. Right? It's flabbergasting to me what the priorities of society and politics have become versus what they really should be. And so people shouldn't be fooled by that. So let's get down to the bare basics. Like, let's make sure that everybody in this country is fed. It's wild to me. It's just wild. And I'm just as selfish as anybody else, to be honest with you. I have created a better life for me and my family, and there's guilt associated with it at times, but I could also say that I do donate a lot. I don't know. I'm just one of those, I'm a big giver, but like, it all can't just rest on my shoulders. Anytime I have a little extra, I'm like, yeah, send it off to feed the children. We do that. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm some amazing human being, but Christ, I think about, like, we go out to dinner. Like, could you not go out to dinner once and maybe feed a kid in the Philippines for a fucking month? We're just all that way. Guys are going out. I get it. I'm one of those too. You're going out, your bar bill's $150 for what? The hangover the next day? You got people 25 miles from here who can't figure out where they get the next meal from. We're sitting there knocking down a $200 bar bill like it's nothing. We're all a little mistaken about this whole thing. And I can encourage anybody in the world to just give a little bit. Dude, even in my worst times financially, I've always found something to give to other people. Sometimes even give to somebody you know.
You know what? And I agree. And I think the three of us on this call, on this discussion right now, are people who dedicated our professional lives to doing for others, doing for strangers. And I think that continues. I know my character and Tom's character is such that we wouldn't pass somebody by who needed something, even if they were a stranger. That's just not who we are. My father raised me differently. We didn't have much at all growing up as a kid. And I used to walk down the street sometimes with my dad. He'd see a guy who was worse off than us, and he'd empty his pocket, which was maybe $3, and give it to the guy. I, as a kid, used to look at him like, hey, what about me? And now as an adult, I look back and go, you gave me the most valuable lesson you could give me. It's not yours. It's given to you by God. Give it to somebody else who needs it, and you're doing the right thing. You can always get it back and get more. You're right. There's a lot of need in this world, but I don't believe the government is the answer.
No.
The government does not know how to use what they take from us the right way. If they did, and they stopped the nonsense they do with our money, they could do a tremendous amount of good. And that's one of the biggest shames.
It's frustrating. It's a very frustrating thing to sit back and watch. And there's so many things that we can speculate, and the reality is, it's like, if I can give any advice to anybody, do what you can to live your life the best way possible. My favorite lines is by Mother Teresa. If you want to do anything great for the world, go home and love your family.
Mm-hmm.
Put more great people into the world. And, at a minimum, we can do that. And we're flawed. We're human. Everything's a fucking mess. But at the same time, it's also not. I mean, I'm in a room right now at a podcast studio. After this, I'm going to go home, have a hot meal, bring 2 of my kids to jiu-jitsu, have laughter with them. We'll probably hang out in my bedroom tonight, laugh. Tomorrow I get to wake up and go do another job. There are people right now in a fucking bunker in the Ukraine hoping that the next shell coming in doesn't have their name on it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Tom and I have traveled the world. We've traveled the world enough collectively to have seen the ways other people live. I have had the experience of driving very slowly in traffic through the slums of Mumbai, India. You ever see, what is it, Slumdog Millionaire?
Slumdog Millionaire, yeah.
That is accurate. The poverty will knock you off your feet. I don't care what you think you've seen in terms of poverty in this country. Mother Teresa was from Calcutta, India. The poverty over there is devastating, and it's built into society that those people will never be any other status or level of society than what they are. And the hopelessness and the feel and having nothing, not knowing when your next meal is, if you can get clean water, living in a corrugated hut, and there's millions and millions of them. It's not 10 people. We are so lucky in this country, so incredibly blessed to have the food, shelter, opportunity that we have. I used to take it for granted. I don't anymore.
Let's all just stop for a second, breathe, appreciate what we have, acknowledge some of the issues we have in this country, and try to make sure that we are you're doing our best to try to avoid cultural disaster. But come on, folks, and there's a big conversation to have here. But the reality is I guess we're going to dial it back into, from the law enforcement sense, I think it's significantly important for us to continue to give the men and women in blue support, and they deserve it more than anybody in this world.
I happen to be. Go ahead, Tom, please.
No, I was just going to say, I just totally agree. Because the rate of mental problems and suicides is to an epic level that has to stop. We just saw it the other day. In the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office
Yesterday,
4 homicides in 24 hours.
4 suicides.
Suicides. I'm sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
That's to think about that is insane. And that has to stop. And the most we can do, the best thing we can do is just keep bringing it up and keep bringing awareness to the situation and the outlets that are out there today, as they weren't years ago when Dan and I started. There's so many more outlets out there today, and it's just got to keep getting talked about.
I think that we are all on the same course, and I think that there are plenty of people in the world who line up with us, and some are tasked by the Lord with taking action, opening mouths, and I think other are, I hate to use the word silent majority, but I don't think you're going to find too many people in the world who are behind anything other than the things that we believe in as well. There's some problematic folks out there, some real troublemakers. But
they get the attention. That's the problem. They get the attention. They get
it's frustrating. It's frustrating. It's frustrating that we are doing the work that we're doing and trying to do our best, and then it can be unraveled in a blink of an eye, and you got to pick all the pieces back up all over again after you built, taking care of the city for so long, all that work that went into it just to give it back to the crime and the insanity.
Yep.
Anything of that sort,
Mm-hmm. I had last week. I was very, very fortunate. My wife and I happened to be going up to Maine for a few days. We had planned it in advance, just kind of a late fall getaway. Drive around. She had never seen it really before, and pretty. And so we went up there, and it happened to be a couple of days after the mass shooting events in Lewiston, Maine. Robert Card was his name, killed 18 people, wounded another 13. Horrible, horrible stuff. And I was staying about 40 minutes south of Lewiston, and I just told my wife on the plane, I said, I feel compelled. I've got to go up there, and I've got to show support any way that I can. And I drove to Lewiston, Maine Police Department. rang the bell with something in my hands for them and just said, hey, I just want you to know you're appreciated, you're supported. And a bunch of them came out and they stood there. We chatted for almost an hour. They couldn't have been nicer. And they were so appreciative. But, to me, it was like they dealt with a major crime scene. 18 dead people. This is Lewiston, Maine. The entire state of Maine has averaged 20-something homicides a year. And these cops, men and women, had to run into that scene, look for this shooter. The entire area was on high alert. It's stressful. It's traumatic. And there were other people pouring into the police agency, bringing pizzas, bringing cards. And they were overwhelmed. But there's such good people and so down to earth. And one of them just reached out again to me yesterday and, hey, really appreciate you come by. And I was like, man, you don't know. I left there wanting to do more for them. And it was nice to see other people doing it as well. There is a lot of good in this world. A lot of people care. We saw that after 9/11. We saw it very clearly. People dropped everything and went out of their way for us. There's a good heart in this country. And so I stay optimistic because I've seen it.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember there being so much donations coming in post 9/11 that they actually came out and said, like, stop bringing stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. It's all going to get spoiled. We have nothing to do with it. We'll let you know what we need. But I remember like they were saying like the dog food, like don't bring any more dog food. We have 10 truckloads of dog food here for the certain rescue dogs. I watched the towers fall. I was right across the water. I told you guys where I'm from. I was delivering pizza that morning when the first plane hit. I pulled around onto Route 1 southbound. I stood up on a bridge where you could see a clear line of the sky, and then I saw the next plane come in, and I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. So it was terribly devastating. People don't understand, and again, I don't put these children at fault. I try to explain to my kids; they'll never understand what that felt like. I would even argue that the rest of the country didn't feel like what New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Pennsylvania felt that day, because we all lost people we knew. It wasn't just the 37 PAPD guys that got killed, or the NYPD guys, or the latter guys. 5,000-6,000 people were murdered. Everybody had somebody who had their father or their aunt or their uncle that was murdered in this thing. And there was the phone lines weren't working. We were all scrambling to find boats to get over there from New Jersey. It was fucking chaos, and nobody knew what was going to happen next. We were just waiting for the next. We thought we were being invaded by another country. And you just didn't know. Then you're hearing on the news, and next plane's down, another plane. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, it took over your life. Everyone's life changed. Dan and I's careers changed. The way you went about your life changed. Everything did. And you had to compartmentalize that and just keep going forward with a changing world. Especially where we went. We end up down in JTTF, and our mission with the police department was dramatically different than running around the Bronx or running around Brooklyn. Was totally different. And we had to switch gears and get on board with that.
Well, boys, it's been a great experience, and I hope we get to do this again. I think we just scratched the surface of all the things we can talk about. Where can they find your podcast and you guys if they want to get in touch?
Our website is thegoldshieldshow.com. On there, you can access our YouTube channel and our Spotify channel, but we're on every audio platform there is: Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, all of it. Buzzsprout, and we have a YouTube channel and a Rumble channel where our videos are. And it's been a great ride. It's Gold Shields, and we bring out the best stories we can from the people who actually did major cases and high-level operations and all that. So we have a really good time doing it.
It's awesome. It's a real pleasure meeting you guys. You guys.
Should we mention our other endeavor?
Yeah, you're good. You go for it.
Tom and I have a company called Impact Solutions. Impact Solutions is a chemical irritant spray. It's an alternative to pepper spray. It does not have the negative effects of pepper spray, but it has the positive effects. No respiratory distress, no cross-contamination, no blowback, no hitting everybody around you. It's target specific, and it cleans up almost immediately with only water. So we have a tremendous amount of interest globally for this product already, and it's been a blast. We're going to be in Dubai at the World Police Summit. We were invited by the head of the Dubai Police, who are sponsoring it. And we're rolling. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. But we know cops need a tool they can work with that they could use anywhere, as opposed to having to check the conditions to make sure it's right to use a pepper spray. We're trying to help cops. We want to see cops get their job done and not get hurt, not get in trouble. Two things we want to see: go home safe in every way you can be safe. So that's Impact Solutions. Look for that. We'll keep you in touch with that as well. Thank you for this time. Really a pleasure talking with you, Dennis, meeting you, and we look forward to coming back at any time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right, boys. Take care.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you, sir.
Hey guys, check out our upcoming training at streetcop.com. Don't forget, we have 50 instructors nationally teaching a variety of topics. These are the best classes you're going to experience in your career. We make sure of it. You're going to love it. I guarantee you're going to be thankful that you went. Check us out at streetcop.com for all upcoming classes in your area.